Hello and welcome to Spy Hard's podcast, where your hosts go deep undercover into the world of spy movies to decipher which films make the knock list. But remember, this information is strictly for your ears only. I'm Agent Scott.
And I'm Cam the Provocateur, chasing cats in Soho.
Soho?
That's how Waverly pronounces it.
That is. And I mean, Waverly seems like a guy who's spent many a nights chasing tail around Soho.
That man has partied so hard that it's turned his brain to jelly, which is why he pronounces it as Soho.
That or maybe carrying dynamite in his tie every day could do it too.
That too. Yeah.
Well, we're heading back to the world of u.n.c.l.E. We've got a great guest, so without further ado, Cam, let's get to the review. All right, folks, we're back to once again open Channel D for the fourth time. But before we can truly dive into the world of u.n.c.l.E., we need to bring in a very special guest, making his triumphant second appearance on Spy Hard's podcast, author, screenwriter, documentarian, the one and only Mr. John Cork. Hello, sir. How are you?
You know, I feel like I'm doing penance for having talked you guys into putting the Wrecking Crew on the knock list from last time, and hence I have been sentenced to the glorious fourth Man from u.n.c.l.E. film. I can't wait to talk about this exciting piece of motion picture entertainment, sirs.
Well, at least one of us is excited about it.
That's right. And that was, I think, the most controversial knock list inclusion ever was the Wrecking Crew, but that made it more exciting.
It's actually brought up conversations since then. People have said, why didn't you put the silencers on? And it felt right.
Yeah. Did the silencers have Bruce Lee involved in it? Did the silencers have Chuck Norris involved in it? Was the silencers shown in one of the greatest films of this century so far, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood? No, it was not. I stand by my strong arming you guys into including it on the knock list.
To be fair, Cam can go to his grave saying he said no.
That's true. I can.
It's me. I'm the easy mark here.
All right. So, are we ready to talk about? Are we ready to say uncle to this film?
I think we might be. But I just want to touch base with you. It's been about a year or so since you've been on the show. What's been going on with you, John? Anything bubbling up you want to share with us you might be working on?
Yeah, so I'm working on a podcast YouTube project that's under the sponsorship of the Ian Fleming Foundation. It's called The Secret World of James Bond. It is going to be looking at the secret origins and untold stories behind the original novels, some stuff about the films, of course, some untold stories about the films. And I have just finished a 6 weeks around the world trip exploring some of those hidden locations from the world of James Bond.
What were some of the highlights, or at least one that really stands out?
I think one of the ones that really stands out is going to the Seychelles, where the short story The Hildebrand Rarity was set, interviewing the son of the treasure hunter that inspired Ian Fleming to first go to the Seychelles, snorkeling off the beach where James Bond snorkels at the beginning of the short story. I think that was one of the highlights.
That sounds okay.
Passable way to spend an afternoon, I suppose.
I guess. You know, if you bend my arm, yeah.
Well, this feels like something that I've not heard about in terms of a project. So this is actually a pretty cool. It's nice to see the Ian Fleming Foundation doing something to push the Bond brand forward a little bit, because you don't hear much news from Bond these days.
Yeah, well, I hear a lot of news from Bond these days. Literally yesterday, I was talking to some folks at Eon Productions. My lips are sealed. I can say no more.
That is the teasiest tease you could ever drop. I mean, how dare you salivate the glands of people listening all around the world and drop in that little nugget, and then we move on to talk about Man from u.n.c.l.E.
Tell you what, which has its own Ian Fleming connection. Y'all have spoken about that so far, right?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
Solo.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The $1, the £1 contract, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah. The expectations for the series were so low. Okay, keep going.
Oh, I think we're warming up for this film. Well, let's jump on over then, Cam. Let's figure this out. What are we talking about?
Yes, we are talking about 1966's One of Our Spies is Missing, which was the film adaptation or film altering of the season 2 two-parter, The Bridge of Lions Affair, which aired in February 1966.
As we mentioned, this is the fourth Man from U.N.C.L.E. movie, I suppose. We'll use that in air brackets, but it's the only way we can talk about the Man from U.N.C.L.E. series on the show. So I'll take this as much as we can get for Solo and Keating. But for those who haven't seen the film, here is your synopsis. One of our spies is missing. A biochemist develops a process that reverses aging, but when he disappears, it's up to Napoleon Solo and Ilya Kuryakin to recover or destroy the process before it falls into the hands of Thrush.
Easy for you to say.
Yeah, quite a mouthful, eh? The hands of
Yeah.
Thrush sounds like something you should see your doctor about.
Also, like, the Thrush aspect comes in partway through the story. Like, there's a whole lot going on in this one.
I want to ask a lot of questions about the gestation and creation of this film, because obviously it's a two-part episode turned into a film, and up until
Yeah.
this point there's been a lot of like bonus scenes shot for these films inserted, like extra plots. I remember there was the Waverly's daughter or like niece in the last one that ends up getting off with Solo at the end of the film, which is just the weirdest thing ever.
Yeah.
I will never pimp any of my nieces out, don't worry.
Yeah, played by Yvonne Craig, who had inserted material in this film.
With a different name, no less.
Yeah, different character. They were like, continuity, get out of here.
It's the same year as well. That's the weirdest thing. They're both 1966. Like, what was in the water in the 60s? People just forgot between films.
It's almost spiteful. They were like, no, we will not name it after the same character.
But what I am curious about before we dive any further into this film is, John, I want to hear from you, because I think your James Bond credentials are pretty cemented. We just cemented them a moment ago. Your Matt Helm credentials are pretty cemented. We did that. But the Man from U.N.C.L.E., what does the Man from U.N.C.L.E. mean to you, and where did you sort of first come to the Man from U.N.C.L.E.?
Well, I was a very small child when this first came on, and I remember liking the logo and sort of conceptually, the title sequence. But I also remember as a small kid, I couldn't follow the storylines. I was like, I literally, as a small child, you turn on TV and, some stories are easy to follow. The Batman episodes, for example, I was all into those as a small kid. So, I mean, I was born in 1961, November of 61. So the pilot shot literally just after I turned 2 came on, before I turned 3 in September of 64. So, when 66 is coming around, I'm still not like digging into deep espionage stories, on that end. And coming back to this as an adult, I realized why I was having trouble as a small child following the stories. It's because the stories are crap. The stories are so bad. They are written by people who have no feel for the espionage genre, and this is across this or whatever. Occasionally, you get some cool stunts. Occasionally, you get something wonderful like Telly Savalas will show up or Kurt Jurgens will show up in the same Man from U.N.C.L.E. feature film. You will get like a fleet of ultralight gyrocopters chasing them down a roadway. You'll find something like really cool like that. But what the hell is going on? I'm telling you, the writers do not know. Okay?
Yeah.
It's just they are literally trying to punch in. And I think this is particularly the case with this film, trying to punch in the beats that they're supposed to have, because the showrunners will say, well, no, we need more of this. We need a scene like this. Oh, we've got this stunt thing we want to do or whatever, and figuring out some rationale for why these things are happening, which is why you get films where, I don't know, maybe the film would make more sense without Napoleon Solo and Ilya Kuryakin actually even appearing in them, which is the case with this movie.
I think there's a bit to unpack there, but I think there's also an interesting element with this coming out in 1966. And you got to remember, this is in the middle of Thunderball and You Only Live Twice and Casino Royale coming out the next year. There is a lot going on with the Bond thing. This is basically the height of the spy boom. So I feel like this film, probably more than any of the ones we've seen from U.N.C.L.E. so far, is just content to get people into theaters because they'll go and see anything spy related.
That's true, but also this was the first film that wasn't released in the U.S. theaters. This was UK only.
I'm sorry, everyone.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
Well, it wasn't just UK only; it was also Australia and other English language markets out there as well. So,
yeah, but this was the first one to bypass U.S. theaters, and it's funny because like I've been working my way through the Man from U.N.C.L.E. TV series, and I'm basically right now at the point of the Bridge of Lions two-parter. I watched that in preparation for this episode, but that's where I am in terms of working my way through the show. And season 1 had some pretty tight espionage stories because the show didn't quite know what it was. So you had some really strong writers coming in and writing like kind of serious espionage stories for an hour. And then the next episode might be kind of loopy, like some of the previous movies we've talked about, like the one with the two Napoleons, for example, running around. Like that's just campy and silly. But then like the next episode might be kind of serious, kind of like the original Star Trek could change tones week to week. Whereas like season 2, they have found a flavor that they like, and that is where they are traveling down. And the previous movie we did, which I'm totally blanking on the title. It's what was it?
One Spy Too Many.
One Spy Too Many, a title that really is generic when you consider what that movie's actually about.
as is One of Our Spies is missing, which has no missing spies.
Yeah, not connected to anything.
Yeah. But that previous one felt like two separate episodes that just had completely different stories going on that were mashed together, and it was kind of incoherent. Like you could follow it just from the villain perspective, but in terms of even what the villain was doing in part 1 versus part 2, it felt just kind of like, okay, as you said, John, like, was it a good spy story? No. It was a super villain and just, death traps, and that's enough.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you say there was a supervillain. There's no supervillain in this movie.
Not in this one. No.
No, the last one you had, what was that chap's name?
It was Rip Torn.
Rip Torn. Yeah, like he was meant to be this megalomaniacal villain, which is something outstanding. But in this one, which we'll get into a bit more, but there really isn't anything in terms of an arch villain to... There's no, like, Goldfinger running around in this film. There is just a guy in a wheelchair for a good portion of it.
Well, when you say Rip Torn, I think it's important for younger viewers to know that was the actor's actual name when he was credited. That's not the name of the character. It sounds so much like a Bond villain character's name or something, right? So...
and he was an actor's actor at that point. He was quite like a serious actor. It was only later in his life that he just started doing wacky roles like Men in Black. So him doing an U.N.C.L.E. two-parter was, a pretty big deal in many ways. But
it was just a paycheck. That's
yeah.
I mean, you gotta pay for the pool maintenance.
Someone's got to buy that second condo.
That's right.
And Rip Torn, not to be confused with Rip Taylor. There was less confetti going on with Rip Torn's performances.
Quite so. Well, okay, Cam, let's get into it. How did the spy go missing?
Okay, so this is actually interesting because I'm going to talk a little bit about the two-parter.
Wait, does that imply everything else we've ever done isn't interesting?
Well,
wait, this is finally interesting. 200 episodes. We found something, everyone.
Well, some of those Men from U.N.C.L.E. two-parters, it was kind of like, yep, they mashed these two episodes together. They threw in this one person, and that's your story. So this one has a story credit by Henry Sleezer, who was a New York-born author and playwright. And he had written several novels, and he was kind of known for his sense of irony. And his book, which was published in 1963, was called The Bridge of Lions, which was actually adapted into the two-parter. Now, the book was about a U.S. secret agent named Latham Drew, who was searching for a missing biochemist.
Great name.
And stumbled upon a wealthy chess club. If you watch that two-parter, The Bridge of Lions, that's all there. The movie, much less so. And so this was actually the only Man from U.N.C.L.E. story to actually be adapted from a novel. And so it was actually like taking that story and then kind of mashing it together with the sensibilities of U.N.C.L.E. But in addition to that, Sleezer was really big in the soap opera world. He would bounce around and do other things. He worked on like Alfred Hitchcock Presents and the Alfred Hitchcock Hour. He did a B movie called Terror from the Year 5000. It was an anthology, and he wrote the segment Bottle Baby, which I'm sure is incredible. But this guy wrote early in his career 121 episodes of the soap opera Search for Tomorrow, which began in 1951. And then, like, he's bouncing around in TV, joins U.n.c.l.E. They obviously adapt this into a two-parter, but he also worked on 2 other episodes. He worked on The Virtue Affair, which he had a teleplay credit on, and he also had a story credit on the late season 2 episode, The Round Table Affair. But then he was gone. He was back to writing short stories, books, plays. He also found time to write 2,833 episodes of the soap opera The Edge of Night.
2,000.
2,833.
That's a lot of TV. I mean, I can't get over the fact he did 150 episodes of a TV show called Search for Tomorrow. That only implies that there was it was a long-running show and they never found tomorrow.
Well, it's like Tomorrow Never Dies, right? You can never find tomorrow because
yeah.
tomorrow is always today.
It all leads back to James Bond, doesn't it?
It does.
It just
and
does.
that soap opera he wrote, the latter one, The Edge of Night, that's where Lori Loughlin made her big debut and would go on to play Aunt Becky on Full House.
You're really proud of that one, but I think most people are just sort of like shrugging at that bit of fact.
No,
okay.
That is big to a certain generation in North America. That's really big.
The Full House fans are raving at that one.
Also, recent criminal cases, but nonetheless, this story was actually fleshed out into a teleplay by New York-born writer Howard Rothman. There's a lot of New York people, who worked on this Man from U.n.c.l.E. story for some reason.
I think it's Rodman, isn't it?
You are correct, actually, John. It is Rodman. I had written Rothman. Well, there you have it.
Yeah, Rodman's got 2 sons who are wonderful writers, work in the industry.
Oh, okay. Do you know anything they've worked on?
I could look them back up, but I can't name them off the top of my head. My apologies.
Fair enough. So Rodman was a TV veteran who'd been around since 1946. Actually worked on a spy anthology TV show in 1955 called I Spy. So that name, I Spy, was actually used before the later on Robert Culp, Bill Cosby show.
Oh.
He also did 26 episodes of the early 60s New York Police Department drama Naked City. And this two-parter for him of Man from U.n.c.l.E. was his follow-up. Scott's going to love this. To the Bob Hope special, Bob Hope presents the Chrysler Theater.
Oh.
But he was a great writer. I mean, when he was working with the right people like Don Siegel, he did 3 great Don Siegel films.
Yeah, that's the thing. After he only did this two-parter for U.n.c.l.E., then he was out. He did not stick around and write more episodes. He worked on the Clint Eastwood 1968 film Coogan's Bluff. He did 1973's Charlie Varick, which is a great Walter Matthau sort of noirish mystery film. I recommend people check it out. It's not one that's name value is necessarily that high, but it's worth watching.
There's a line of dialogue in Charlie Varick that Quentin Tarantino co-ops in Pulp Fiction.
Oh, do you remember what part it is?
It's about going after you with pliers, and I can't remember exactly what it is, but it's yeah.
Okay, so that's Marcellus Wallace's threat to Zed. Okay.
Yeah,
and I remember like that is kind of the rare film that like positions Walter Matthau as like a sex symbol type, because like he is like a big ladies' man in that story, and typically Walter Matthau didn't play those types of characters, so it's just fun from that point of view as well.
I can't say I've ever said Walter Matthau sex symbol in the same sentence, but hey, it's got to be someone's back.
It was the 70s.
Yeah, you mentioned Coogan's Bluff. That it basically inspires a TV show called McCloud, which was a huge TV phenomenon in the United States for a while back in the 1970s as well. So that comes straight out of Coogan's Bluff. I mean, it's a straight line from there.
Yeah, and Coogan's Bluff is a really interesting movie that in some ways paves the way for like things like Dirty Harry as well.
Yeah, absolutely. The Clint Eastwood role in there is the rule breaker. The chief is always, the sheriff is always like, come on, play by the rules. He's like, I got to do it my way and hang from this helicopter. So
does he hand in his gun and badge at any point in that film? Because that does feel like a Dirty Harry thing to do.
No, I don't think he does.
Yeah.
But I could be wrong. It's been so many years since I've seen the movie. I saw it a number of times back in the 80s. Really enjoyed it. So
I feel like that trope maybe starts around the Dirty Harry period. It seems like that kind of that anti-hero cop thing.
possibly so, but I mean, Dirty Harry is just taking the character from Coogan's Bluff and rebuilding him better and stronger, which also leads to some other
Mhm.
things with Howard Rodman.
Yeah, he co-wrote the $6 Million Man TV movie, which
Oh,
would
okay.
launch a pretty major franchise.
It's one I'm surprised it's still not alive now. I think that format still has a bit of life to it.
Yeah, but what are you going to title it? Because the $6 Million Man sounds like somebody with just a knee replacement at this point.
I know they were developing a movie based on it for a while, and at one point they were actually going to call it the $6 Million Man, and the joke would be they put very little money into actually rebuilding him, and they were going to make it more of a comedy.
Oh, okay.
And so like it'd be things that just go wrong constantly. And I don't remember who the star. It was a star attached. It might have been like Ben Stiller or something. I don't remember.
Oh,
And they
okay.
did also look. I think it was could have been George Clooney was attached to like a proper version that would have been. I think they were going to call it 60 million or $600 million Man.
Yeah, not got the same ring to it, $6 Million Man. But hey ho, hey ho.
Yeah, I kind of like the junky version. Like just call it $6 Million Man and stick with that.
Well, Rodman, that was all he ever did with $6 Million Man was the TV movie, and he was only one of a few writers who was involved and credited on it, and I think he regretted it because a few years later he tried to create something for TV called Exo Man, which is very similar to the guy's just built a sort of external suit that allows him to be stronger, and he's been paralyzed, and he can now go fight crime in his exosuit.
Sort of like RoboCop.
Yeah, except dumber.
Okay.
Oh,
So RoboCop 3.
right. Yeah.
I couldn't
Sure.
figure out though with
Yeah.
Rodman because he's obviously credited on that $6 Million Man TV movie, but he doesn't have a credit on the TV show that came after. And I would have thought working on that film would have gotten you some sort of like creator credit.
Well, it was based on a novel called Cyborg, and that novel, so the underlying rights already existed, and then it's like, okay, who's going to write the dialogue? And I believe what he did with it, and I could be wrong because I've never looked at the scripts, is that they tried to push it into more of a James Bond direction for the first 3 made-for-TV movie things that they did with $6 Million Man before it actually really went to series. And they actually said, when it became a big hit, we had to once we backed off the James Bond aspects of $6 Million Man, the audience came back in. But having him be this sort of womanizer, arched eyebrow, sophisticated, guy who you open with him in the ski chalet making out with the random woman. Once they backed off of that stuff and got him to where he's going to use his talents to leap up into the tree and save the kitten for the little girl, that's when the series actually took off.
Okay, now I've never watched $6 Million Man. Is there like many spy elements to it, or not so much?
Those early episodes, I was all into them because, of course, I loved that stuff as a kid. I was,
Okay.
it comes out in 1973, like March of 73, so right before Live and Let Die. And, me and my friends, we were all into it. And I remember watching it and seeing the change in tone and being like, where's the cool guy that I
Mm.
liked?
Mhm.
And then, but you always waited for that music to gear up and him to start running in slow motion and stuff like that. That was the fun.
And it became, I guess, more like superhero-esque later down the road.
Yeah, it was. It just became softer, and that
Yeah.
was okay. But he was going through and sort of helping people who were having some sort of crisis in their life, and there were villainous forces. But I stopped watching it once it
Mm.
became less Bondian uh, on that end. But that is what happened to that series, and it became they obviously made the right choice because the ratings weren't that great until they took that element out. And
Right.
that's when the audience came in.
Okay. Okay. Is it worth tracking down? Because as I said, I'm working my way through Man from Uncle. Should I be tracking down the $6 Million Man box set?
You're talking to somebody who cannot read your mind. I mean, you wouldn't even give the Wrecking Crew a knock
Oh,
list vote. So how can I know what you ought to do, sir?
that's an excellent
He's a
point.
man who has a poster for Star Trek V on his wall.
Mm,
Like, we can't say his taste is any good, really.
that's true. Okay. Well, as for the director of this film, it was Darrell Hallenbeck, who started as a second assistant director on the 1958 Oscar-winning musical Gigi, and he also worked on the Robert Taylor Sid Charisse rom-com Party Girl, and then moved into television, where he was an assistant director for quite a long time. He joined Man from U.N.C.L.E, the TV show, as an assistant director with the third episode, the quadripartite affair. That's a very tough word to say. And worked on the first two seasons, including The Spy with My Face, the film. So
Okay.
we covered that one on the show. He was an assistant director on that film / two-parter.
Well, he was also second unit director, which is a that's a very different job when you're second unit director.
Yes. He also worked on the Robert Vaughn 1966 spy film, The Venetian Affair, which, despite the title, is not a Man from U.N.C.L.E film.
That's actually a film that we've had mentioned to us a few times online, so it's one I'm looking forward to checking out down the road. Apparently, it's got quite a little. It's like a spy movie fans film.
Yeah, we've had people request to join us for that one too. So yeah.
Never seen it. I couldn't say if it's any good. I wouldn't know.
John?
My lips are sealed.
Okay. Oh, jeez.
Another tease. This man is all tease.
So it was 66 that Hallenbeck made his jump to actually directing, and his debut directorial effort was the second season episode, The Arabian Affair, and Bridge of Lions was his third effort. He did 12 overall and 3 episodes of The Girl from U.N.C.L.E. He also directing wasn't really his thing. Ultimately, he
You've seen the movies, you think?
I'm glad one of us said it. I had that chambered too. Thank you, John. He also became a production manager. He'd actually been a production manager on The Twilight Zone in the 60s, but later in his career, he really worked in production managing for quite a while on some major projects. He worked on All the President's Men.
Right.
He worked on the cult sci-fi film My Science Project, the Brat Pack film About Last Night, and a credit I've left till last purposely to see the look on Scott's face, Trenchcoat.
Oh, no. Oh, no. One of the worst films we have ever tackled on this show. I really wish it was better, but I have nightmares about Trenchcoat.
Yeah.
If I see someone in a parka, I do shiver a little bit.
John, have you seen Trenchcoat?
Again, my lips are sealed.
Oh.
So, no, this guy, the reason he works on All the President's Men is because he's following the money. Nobody was going to pay him to direct anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, his directorial choices in this, and clearly a very skilled production manager. There are 2 tracks. I don't know if you've ever been on film sets, know much about how film sets work, but assistant directors don't work for the director. They work for the producer, and they work under the production manager, who also works for the producer. And their job is to yell at people and get everybody on the set on time and make sure that the production is staying on schedule. And that's the production manager as well. Make sure that the locations are ready, the props are ready, the costumes are ready, hair and makeup is being told to stop dawdling around, and it's good for sound, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's their job. And it's a very different track than directing, where you're just trying to make sure the shots are really communicating. So his second unit directing is doing action scene stuff, which is sometimes good on Man from U.N.C.L.E and stuff. But he has no clue how to build a scene or get you to a point to where you even get some of the jokes that he's trying to tell in this episode.
Yes. Yes. There's a lot to say about this film. It's actually one of the more interesting Man from U.N.C.L.E films to talk about. I think we've dealt with so far, because I think the previous 3 are pretty clean transitions, going from the 2-part stories or the longer episode into the film, whereas like this one really is kind of a crazy cobbling together of a movie out of a 2-parter. So that'll be in just a minute, but I'll mention a couple other things. Yvonne Craig was inserted into this film for, I don't know, I guess just marketing reasons, because she actually replaced Lee Chapman, who played basically the same character in the 2-parter. And actually, I thought some of the scenes were better with Lee Chapman. So I'm not really sure what they were going for. It was entirely, I think, just a casting thing on a poster.
Was Yvonne Craig a bigger name in that sense? Like, Could she put people in seats?
Yeah, I would think so.
you know, there's also things that happen where you might have a performer uh, whose agent comes in and objects and says, "No, if you're going to release this theatrically overseas, you got to pay us more money or something like that." And
Yeah.
they're like, "Well, maybe we don't. You know, maybe
Mm.
that's going to be an easy one to work around. You never can tell."
Yeah. Yeah, that's actually a really good point. And then they also added another character, Dodo, played by Anna Capri in this film. That character is not in the two-parter, and that is the young like model that is hanging out with Lorelai before she's killed.
Oh.
Yeah, the Mike Tyson wannabe
Yeah, the one that has the fight with Robert Vaughn.
bites a chunk out of his ear.
Yeah,
So in the TV episode, he just turns up at the house and she's in the bathtub.
she's never in the bathtub. She's not killed that way. Like that's the thing. They
Oh.
make wild changes to things they don't have to change.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Well, they wanted to have. I mean, you know what they want to have in there is you know, the chance for the fight scene with Robert Vaughn and her. Is she killed in the TV episode with strangled by the phone cord?
she is. Yes.
Yeah, so that's in the original script. Is that she's strangled with the telephone cable on there while she's talking to Napoleon Solo on there, which makes a lot more sense since he has to go to the Maison de Sala to meet her, hands her his card, doesn't get any information from her, but apparently knows her phone number and address in the film, you know, which doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. Yeah, because Robert Vaughn is actually talking to Lorelai on the phone when she's killed.
Yeah, and Olga says, you know, you've been disconnected.
Yeah, whereas in the film, it's Anna that answers the phone and basically just tells Napoleon, like, you know, you're not talking to her.
Wow.
Yeah, well, that's a great fight scene though between Napoleon Solo. I'm saying all this with sarcasm, folks, so just have to put up with this. Between
I
Napoleon
was
Solo,
like, wow, that's a wrecking crew take.
she pulls out she pulls out a freaking letter opener knife, right?
Yeah.
And he looks like, oh my God, what am I going to do now? And rather than just slap the thing out of her hand or grab her wrist, which is clearly in his power to do, he hits her with the cushy pillow. He literally picks up a soft pillow and swats at her with it. I just thought, oh my God, what, you know, this is clearly shot in an hour, you know, no rehearsals.
He's clearly adept with the cushy pillow because she takes a tumble. Like he hit his target, to be fair.
Yeah.
Like he doesn't want to damage that pretty face, maybe. So he's trying to protect her good looks.
Maybe.
I listen, if you think there's any motivation in this aside from let's get this done, we only have a short period of time and we've got to spend as little money as possible. I mean, there's no big action scene in this entire freaking feature film.
No, not one.
Well, there's far more in the action in the film than there is in the two-parter.
Yeah, and again, I mean, the film is just you know, there are a couple of impressive things in there, but we can get to those. So let's
Yes.
I'll try not to distract from.
No. Couple other notes. The de-aging machine they used in this film and two-parter. They made it out of reused parts from Robbie the Robot, who, of course,
I knew it.
famously appeared in Forbidden Planet and also the lesser-known Invisible Boy.
I knew I recognized that robot head.
Uh-huh.
Yes. So, yeah, listen, these things were made for TV, and you can tell they were made for TV because the sets are made from leftovers from other sets from other films. And it's not just Robbie the Robot, it's everything. And you know, it's like I think there are 3 of the Man from U.N.C.L.E. films where they continually go up to some estate house and it's the same gates
Yeah.
for each film.
Well, I think we've seen those gates twice at least. In this one, I think we saw it maybe in the first one with Luciano Paluzzi.
Yeah.
During that sequence there.
Yeah.
I think it was the same
I think
one.
you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they just show back up because, you know, that's what they've got. I mean, it's now I do want to go because we have passed when Solo goes to Paris, and I want to ask you the tell you one great piece of trivia,
Sure.
which is, did you know that Maison de Sala, the you know, courtier, the high couture salon that he's going to go into there,
Mm-hmm.
is directly across the street from the International Brotherhood for the Assistance of Stateless Persons. And do you know what the International Brotherhood for Assistance to Stateless Persons is?
I'm glad you threw that in at the end because I don't know.
Well, that would be the cover for Spectre in Thunderball. So they are
Oh.
actually on the God they are on Avenue d'Elu. I think I'm saying that correctly, which is right off the Place de Mexico. And the stock footage shot they have of the street where supposedly this place is looking straight down that street. You can tell because it's the only street in Paris that has the Eiffel Tower in the background of the street like that.
Oh.
And so he goes, if you're towards camera, he moves off to the right, whereas Largo crosses the street to the left to go to the International Brotherhood for the Assistance of Stateless Persons.
I will find those shots and put them next to each other online so you can all enjoy it in glorious, well, not 4K,
I was going to say
360p maybe, or something like that. Smoke signals, something. Yeah, but that is why, John, you are here. You've just proved this is why you need to be here talking about One of Our Spies is Missing. It was destined to be.
Yeah, it's like we bring you on for a Bond film. We're going to get great insight. But here's a movie where the Wikipedia page is blank and you're contributing things that can stand and correct and change the record of this movie's, production.
I'm going to tell you the word insight and One of Our Spies in Missing should not be in the same sentence, okay?
Couple notes to close it out. They had to record a new score for this film by Gerard Fried, who'd worked on Man from U.N.C.L.E, but all the music they used in The Bridge of Lions was just recycled music, and so they ended up doing a new score here. It's not great.
Boy, did they.
It's not great. And the top 3 for the year: number 1, The Bible in the Beginning; number 2, Hawaii, the Julie Andrews, Max von Sydow epic that I haven't seen and I've mentioned so many times on the show. I need to remedy that one day. And number 3, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf?
So you might not know this, but one of the great themes of the film Hawaii is incest.
Great.
So you get ready for some brother-sister love that's going to tug at your heartstrings there.
Oh my God.
I'm not joking.
Okay.
I am not.
I mean, Cam was on the fence about watching it until now, and he's fully
Listen,
committed.
If you have a sister, watch it with your sister. I dare you. Okay. All right. Anyway, I'm serious. The movie, one of the core stories is about a brother-sister love affair.
Well, Scott and I do a show on the Patreon called Agents in the Field, where we cover movies that feature popular spy actors. And so Max von Sydow, we can cover it, Scott. We can cover it.
I can't wait.
Yeah. It's only 3 hours.
Yeah. So, but I would like to see if y'all would indulge me. Can we go back and talk about this score just a little bit?
Yeah. Go for it.
Okay, because Gerald, and I'm going to say that his name was Fried, but I don't know that I've ever heard anybody pronounce it.
Sure.
It may be fried. I can't tell.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly my brain was fried listening to this music here. There are suspense scenes that are going on here that I think would have been more suspenseful if they just tracked in yakety sax as opposed to the score that he's producing on there, because it just goes beyond belief. That said, he was an accomplished composer. I think this was probably stuff he had sitting in his trunk that he was had done for some other purposes and just, had to get thrown in. He needed tunes to put into this because they weren't going to spend any money off of this thing. They committed to this being their feature. And I think when they looked at it, they were like, yeah, we're done.
Yeah, this was not bringing Hans Zimmer on for Dune and being like, we'll take the time for you to build your own instruments. This was probably a case of you've got 2 days.
I mean, I was impressed with the guy, I have to say, because he found 20 different ways of doing Rule Britannia.
Yeah, well, that's because they had one sort of stock shot of Britain, and nobody has. I mean, I say nobody. Morris Evans was British, and they had but there was nothing convincing that they were in England in this thing.
Oh, I mean, their depiction of Soho, which is a
Soho.
thriving metropolitan Soho, is a thriving metropolitan part of central London. Looks like it's out of the Dark Ages. There's like carts and stuff. That's not how it looked in the 60s. What on earth were they talking about with that?
They just were like, somebody wrote down, Soho, and somebody went and said, let's go see if we can find the old silent version of Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde sets and set it there. I mean, yeah, but the music, this guy who wrote the music, Gerald Fried, I mean, he was one of the composers. He worked with Quincy Jones on the score for Roots later years. He experienced a terrible tragedy. He had a child who at 5 years old had gotten a blood transfusion in the early 80s and died from AIDS because it was tainted blood. And he wrote about that in a very moving way. And so, he was a very talented person. And I don't want to besmirch his memory on this. And it's not that the music is bad. It's just bad for this show.
Yeah. Well,
sure.
Even like the TV show, I mean, he does a lot of work on the show, and I have no complaints about his music in season 2 of Man from U.N.C.L.E. It's just this movie is a little awkward, but it's funny because, John, you were on previously for The Wrecking Crew, another movie that had a score that for me did not work at all either.
No. I'm not sure what sins I'm atoning for, but bring it on. I can take it. I'm man enough.
You're building up to, like, we'll give you a Roger Moore Bond film or something down the road, like a big one, but you need to pay your dues to get there.
Right.
Yeah, that's what I feel like I need to do in my life at this point.
Yeah.
Pay my freaking dues. Okay.
It'll be for Fear Eyes Only, which has the Bill Conti score.
I've met Bill Conti. I interviewed Bill Conti. Bill Conti is a wonderful man. I think just an episode, because going into the whole film it's too much for the amount of time you have. We should just do the song that's playing by the pool when the crossbow scene by the pool, because there's a song that's playing right then, and I think an entire hour-long episode just talking about that song would be good.
Okay, well, put that one in the calendar there, Scott. But that sums me up on the behind the scenes on One of Our Spies is Missing. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt the discussion, gents, but I have some breaking news. To celebrate the festive season, we are giving away another copy of John Walsh's fantastic book, The Third Man, the official story of the film. To enter, all you have to do is join our Patreon at any of the paid levels before January 31st, 2025. Once you've joined, your name will be put into a hat and the winner will get a signed copy of the book alongside some other Spy Hards goodies. Plus, you'll have access to over 100 bonus Spy Hards episodes. Sounds like a deal if you ask me. But don't worry, folks, if you're already a member of our Patreon, you'll be automatically entered into the draw. You don't have to do anything at all but sit back and enjoy. So, if you want to get your hands on a copy of this tremendous book, make sure to join our Patreon on any of the paid tiers before the 31st of January 2025. You can find a link to the Patreon in the show notes below, or head on over to patreon.com/spyhards. But without further ado, let's get back to your regularly scheduled Spy Jinx. Before I get to emailing Bill Conti's team and organising that interview, let's get to One of Our Spies is Missing. And John, you may have slightly layered in your thoughts on the film already, but I'm going to give you the stage. What do you think of this film?
Well, I think that somebody, was still in a fever dream having watched 101 Dalmatians, so that's where you kind of get the cat kidnapping thing. I think that the first pitch of this, that Mr. Rodman had convinced them that somehow he was going to be able to work in a line of dialogue that would pass standards and practices for the network, where they would talk about Ilya Kuryakin was in London chasing pussy. As opposed to cats, because all those lines fall totally flat on there. And I think there's this brilliant speech at the beginning where I thought, oh my God, we're going to go somewhere with this, where Vera Miles gives the sort of feminist, the feminine mystique, feminist manifesto speech about, it's a man's world and we need the power and you don't understand, they created this world and I'm worth more than just doing a fashion design and stuff like that. And I found a way to like seize that power.
Mm-hmm.
And this never comes up again. Not one single word of it comes up again on there. This, uh, every attempt to do, I mean, any sort of storyline, the cat that Ilya Kuryakin releases at the beginning with the necklace on it, and he goes back in and he finds one and he goes, this got the necklace, and he's like, oh, why are you now a little kitten? It's a different cat. It has a different coat on it. It's like a completely different color pattern on it. Everything about this speaks to something that was being done by people um, because they were trying to cash paychecks, and that's it's incredibly frustrating on that end to watch. I mean, nothing about this thing makes me go, oh wow, I want to see anything more that has anything else to do with Man from U.N.C.L.E. Now I've seen all the stuff that has to do with Man from U.N.C.L.E., but I mean, this is the bottom. This is the nadir. I mean, How to Steal the World at the very end of the run, the last feature film version thing they do, it's just so much better than
Right.
this is. They all are, you know. So
No, I mean it's kind of crazy because to think that, I mean, if this turns out to be the bottom, the lowest rated of the Uncle films, it's very odd that it comes right in the middle of the run of, I think, 7 or 8 films. But I said this earlier, I think a lot of this just speaks to wanting to cash in on a craze. There is no actual, I mean, there is artistry going on. There are people that are trying to do good work, actors and production crew, stuff like that. But it just reeks of a cash in, the whole thing.
A cat in.
That's why I do the puns on the show. I mean,
Yeah. I apologize. Even before I said it, I knew it was a bad idea. I was like, pull up.
but even with the cash in thing, which I was accusing it of as well, it has another fundamental problem, which is it's not being directed by somebody who is competent, and you can't fix that. You can't edit the pace within a scene sometimes. If it's not there in the performances, it's very hard to work around that on that end. And this thing has a pacing that is slower than a Billie Eilish song. I mean, it is like, I feel like I could have seen Haley's Comet return to Earth twice. And I'm going to tell you, the whole thing is about a rejuvenation, formula that's going to make you feel young again. Watch this, feel like you're on the edge of death by the end of it, and then walk outside, take in some fresh air, and then you will feel young again, because this thing will age you watching this like no other film I've seen in a long time.
I mean, there's nothing like trash to make you appreciate other things.
Yeah.
This actually has appreciated. I actually like Trenchcoat more.
Oh
for watching
jeez.
this.
Oh jeez.
Um, the top line of my review just says 90 minutes of my life is missing.
Oh yeah.
I didn't dig any further into it. I mean, it's easily the most unwatchable Uncle film I've seen thus far. And I'm not watching the TV show contemporaneously. I'm just watching these films. That's my only experience the entire way through. I may go back and watch the show at some point down the road. But like, it seems to have forgotten all of the lessons it learned from the first film. Firstly, your men from U.N.C.L.E., your leads, are not in a lot of this film.
Yeah.
Or they're not involved in a lot of the plot machinations. And as John said, there's this whole setup at the beginning about the feminist manifesto, as it were. And I was like, I wrote down, oh, is this kind of like the In Like Flint movie? We're going with that, like with the hair salon stuff and stuff. Oh, this is interesting. No, it's about men gaining power through getting younger. And but even like some of the thematic stuff it tries at the beginning doesn't get resolved. There's nothing here of merit. I can't, like, my likes section is dreadfully short.
I had a question for you, Scott, and maybe John too, if your memories of the two-parter weren't particularly strong. Did you find a lot of it confusing from like a storytelling perspective?
Yes, I had to actually go and read on Wikipedia at one point what had happened, especially in the beginning 30 minutes. I found like I felt like I missed scenes, but I went back and checked and I hadn't missed anything. It just didn't tell me.
Yeah, because they had cut out so much material from the two-parter that it was kind of unbelievable to me. Like it
Right.
may like surprise you to know, but like the Maurice Evans character of Norman Swickert is arguably the lead of the two-parter. It's very much about his character. Um, and that's like a big deal. Whereas like they've cut his screen time down to next to nothing in this film, and a lot of the setups and payoffs now don't have setups. So, John, you mentioned the cat that Ilya finds. There's a whole subplot about Ilya going and procuring a large tabby cat that he uses that collar on so that he can track it so that when he finds the kitten, he can acknowledge, oh, they've used a rejuvenation because it's now a kitten. But they've scrapped that entire setup, and so you just have a payoff. I'll give you another example. Ilya shows up outside like a lair and finds a hat on the ground. Well, in the two-parter, you see Vera Miles in there. You know everything she's doing. She walks out, loses her hat, and has to keep going because she's going to get caught. And Ilya shows up seconds later and finds the hat. It's like all this material that was all the setups is just been completely excised, and they have inserted so much new footage in especially the first half, I guess to give this thing some sort of marketing value,
Mm.
that they've actually taken what is a I mean, I guess I'll just, ping over to my thoughts, but like the two-parter as it stands, like from the original show, is not great. But the first hour of it is actually, I thought, quite strong as sort of a slow burn, setting the pieces into place. There's a big chess motif that's in the TV two-parter that is sort of given lip service in the film, but largely cut out.
Hmm.
And so you have this idea of all these participants. Um, Thrush shows up midway through part one, but mostly because they don't quite know what's going on and they want to get involved. And then they kind of find their footing as the story goes, and Bernard Fox's Jordine becomes a bigger player as the story goes. But that's not what initially is sort of the driving force of the story. It's what is going on with Vera Miles' character and this de-aged character that Jimmy Doohan plays, like the mystery of what's going on there. And so it's like really like kind of like layering out where you're going to go for the first hour. And then I think the second hour is very poor. I think pacing wise, it just completely falls apart. All the intrigue that's built up isn't really paid off in satisfying ways. You get
Mm.
two scenes of them stuck in that wine vat, and you're like, really? Like, we built to this twice? Whereas, like, in terms of watching it as a film, I spent the first hour, and I find it actually a very tough movie for me to review because I was so perplexed as to what they were doing, just carving out all of the story setup. Because I'm sitting there going like, wow, like Jordine was actually a pretty interesting character in the two-parter, but here I have no idea what he's doing. And it just felt like a lot of it was incoherent. And Ilya is playing around with cats. You don't know why, but I don't think that's the best part of the two-parter. It's actually not particularly a well-advised storyline going on in that two-parter, but it at least makes sense. Whereas here, you just sit there and scratch your head. It just feels, cash in is the ultimate word because there's no real merit to it. At a certain point, I was just more entertained looking for what they would insert to distract from this overall story they'd taken from a novel.
Mm.
You've got action scenes that have been thrown in, like a shootout in probably the film studio where this movie was, or this TV show was shot. You've got a car chase going on. None of that's in the original story. It felt like they had a two-parter to work with, and they knew they wanted to turn this two-parter into a movie, and the two-parter is kind of boring. And they realized that was a problem, so they kind of just took spare parts from it and tried to build something new, but what's new can't sustain itself. It just collapses.
Well, I have a question. I don't know if anyone here can answer it. I'll put it out to the universe. Hopefully, someone like Bill Koenig's listening and can write in and tell us. But with these TV movie or movie adaptations for the big screen, was there only like two-parters in the second season, for instance, so they had to go with this two-parter, or could they have picked other options and just didn't pick it?
They made movies out of all the two-parters going for it. They just did in like I think it was the first season where we did it was the Second Man from U.N.C.L.E. film. That one was one episode they expanded. From that point forward, they were all two-parters.
And there were no other two-parters that weren't turned into films.
No.
Okay, so they were kind of stuck with, like, if we're doing a two-parter, this is becoming a film, right? And then they're stuck with a boring two-parter, and they had to try and add some sex to it.
Yeah, and my main take was watching the two-parter the night before I watched the movie was like, oh, this is going to be a really rough movie, because I was genuinely concerned I was going to watch an hour and 40 minutes of that two-parter just stitched together. And that's not what I got. So that was kind of rewarding, but at the same point, I just thought, like, God, they had nothing to work with, and so they felt they just needed to completely kind of build something anew, and what they built is pretty poor.
Yeah, once again, the words rewarding and one of our spies are missing. I'm just not sure they should be in the same paragraph. So,
yeah.
Well, that leads me on to brighter and more cheerful things. Let's celebrate. If there's anything to say that's good about this film, there has to be a like, and I'm putting you into the firing line, John. You're up first. Is there something you like about One of Our Spies is Missing?
okay, the things that I like about One of Our Spies is Missing. I obviously like the stock footage shot of Paris because it's the same street as Thunderball.
Yeah.
So I like that. I like the sort of absurdity of this young woman being able to pin Napoleon Solo down and bite a hunk out of his ear. I wish they had actually had a hunk bitten out of his ear in the course of it there. Vera Miles is good in places in this there. I got so little, I got to tell you. I mean, and because I'm a masochist, I did watch this twice and read the script before coming on this podcast.
Oh my God.
Mainly because I wanted to make sure I truly could talk about the story coherently. And that did require a second watch because it does not make a damn lick of sense.
Well, there's a question in that, because you went and read the script. Obviously, you visited the film twice, but did you glean anything from the script that was there things that didn't make the film, or things that you maybe learnt about it through reading the script?
Oh, it's all the stuff that Cam has said, so that you have scenes that are better explained. You have some lengthy monologues that show up in here, some real sort of let's chew up the scenery type of things. But as best I could tell from reading the script, there's still no explanation for why why anybody has a grape crusher in England, since there was literally no wine industry in England in the mid 60s, none whatsoever. So why they have the wine vat with the automated grape stomping machine, and why it doesn't crush them. I mean, there's like no explanation for why the thing stops, and they're in there twice. I mean, the thing is being lowered on them twice, and it's sort of like, well, we'll just sit here. I guess it's sort of crimping our style a little bit above our shoulders, but that's it. There's nothing.
It's like, well, we paid for this prop. I guess we're going to use it again.
Yeah, it's like if they'd used that pendulum from the previous movie multiple times. But it's funny because, like, when they showed the vat the first time, they're like putting up something to try to stop it. Maybe if they'd like stopped it, it would make sense. Like, okay, we managed to stop it. Now we're trapped. Now we've got to get out. Then you go, okay, cool, that makes sense. But instead, like, it seems like it's more of just like a very cramped holding cell they keep throwing them into. And it's supposed to be scary, but it's definitely not the second time. Like, they should not have gone back to it.
And there was one other thing I liked. The actor who played his name is Felton or whatever his name is, the big, huge, 7-foot tall bodyguard kind of guy, who is weirdly outfoxed at the gate for no reason, but can literally lift up the front of the car and pivots it around to move in the other direction. But when he conks Solo and Kuryakin's heads together, you have a shot of him carrying, I'm sure they were stuntmen, but he's bodily carrying two grown-ass men into that barn area where the wine vat thing is. And you see him bodily carry them up the stairs. And I just want to say, that's physically impressive.
Mhm.
Now, the next great thing is that, apparently Ilya Kuryakin was okay, but when he dumps Ilya Kuryakin into the wine vat, which I'm sure had all sorts of mattresses and pads and stuff like that in there, he dumps him in passed out head first.
Yeah.
And if you watch him go in, you're going like, that's a cranial injury that's going to require surgery. I mean, there's no way you land on your noggin like that passed out and you're going to be okay.
Yeah.
So that was impressive. I thought his physicality in that moment was good.
Shout out to name's Cal Boulder.
Yeah.
He played Fleeton is the character's name, but he also appeared in the previous film, One Spy Too Many, as the chap working in the gymnasium who pins Robert Vaughn to the wall and does the shot you then get again and never again, with Connery being pinned down by the weights machine.
That's right.
Nice.
Yeah. And you could tell that when Cal Boulder was going to throw the unconscious Solo, you could see like Robert Vaughn kind of like carefully like holding on to him to slide down his arms, basically. Yeah, it's like that character is really fun, and he has two other like. Well, the moment with the car is great.
It's great.
Him picking up the car and then Robert Vaughn just driving in reverse through the door. I thought that was actually like maybe the highlight of the entire film / two-part episode. Like I thought that was really funny and clever. But also I laughed out genuinely when Ilya takes him down and like springs off his back over the fence. Like Ilya suddenly turned into a jungle cat.
That was the best stunt in there.
It was great.
Oh my God, that was a fantastic stunt where he leaps off the guy's, sort of kneeling back and sort of bounds over the wall. That was good. Now in the two-parter, does he follow Solo in? Because he does in the script. Because I haven't rewatched the two-parter, but he comes in and then he's dismissed by Sir Norman after Solo has gotten inside.
I believe that was the case, yes.
Okay, because in the film, of course, he just looks at it like, oh, well, the house is about 25 yards away. I guess I just must stand here now.
Yeah.
There's no, in the film, it doesn't have any follow through.
There's a lot of shoe leather in the two-parter. Like you could tell they were taking basically what could have been a very strong 1 hour episode, and we're just like, how do we get this to 2 hours?
But you mentioned the wine press. There's another device that's used twice in there. So in the backdrop of the theater where the car chase ends and the little MG is lifted up on the lift and Robert Vaughn comes spinning in during the fight with Dodo, I guess it is. Up there, I think it's the same actress. I'm blurring on it now, but she starts yelling, shoot him, and then she's the one who gets shot. It's the same device that happens at the very end when Thrush Agent Jardine shoots Vera Miles. At the end, the wrong person takes the bullet on there, and this is the sign of something's being written too quickly because the writer's just having to recycle the same ideas over again.
Well, yeah, the one where the henchwoman gets shot and the dummy goes off the railing, that was new footage for the film. So they already had Vera Miles getting shot, and then they basically replicated that moment with new footage.
Just a shout out to a dummy being used in a spy film as well. Always great to see.
Yes. Yeah.
Always love a bit of that. We still need that dummy out the window, genie in a bottle jingle. Someone please make it and send it in so I can annoy Cam with it.
I was just going to say another bonus if you're going to have a character named Dodo who's replaced by a dummy.
That's true.
Just a synonym at that point.
It's true.
It doesn't get better than that. I was just looking up the actress who played Dodo, Anna Capri. Just some crazy little credits. One of her last credits is in 1973's Enter the Dragon, of course, the Bruce Lee spy film. And she was in a connection for all of us here, the Matt Helm TV series.
Oh, boom. There you go.
There you go. It all comes back to Matt Helm and James Bond.
Yeah.
And Man from U.N.C.L.E. For my I thought about going with a serious one because it is quite clear that Maurice Evans is in a completely different film to everyone else.
Yeah.
Can I just help out for? I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, go on.
He pronounced his name Maurice.
Yeah.
Fine. I mean, we've had a whole thing about pronunciations.
Yeah.
Should we clear this up now? Can we talk about this?
Go to town,
Yeah.
sir.
So, John, you love to drop us an email from time to time with your thoughts about an episode that we've done, and you dropped us an email about a certain fan favorite here on Spy Hards, and that is one of the many people to have played the character, but of course we call him Keck Linder.
Yeah.
To which you wrote in, it's not pronounced Keck, it's actually pronounced, I believe, Cease.
Cease, as in Cecil, which was his name.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, and that's the famous Felix Leiter from Goldfinger, who the ladies are all hooting and hollering over at the pool.
They can't get enough of old Cease.
Mm.
But I've heard so many Bond fans call him Keck Linder, even on like podcasts and stuff. So I mean, I take you are the gospel on this one. So it is Cease Linder, and forever will cease to be Keck.
Oh,
That's
nice.
right. Cease and desist using Keck.
There you go. But thank you for that correction too. But I mean, he's in a completely different film. But I will just point out, it is nice to see some absurdity in a Man from U.N.C.L.E. story. I mean, we mentioned the wine vat. There's a couple of other crazy things. Obviously, de-aging, cats being de-aged. But my favorite moment is right at the end where the scientist is de-aged to about a 10-year-old.
Fatally.
Fatally, but still has a mustache. I love it. I think that's great. That's such a great little like visual gag that made me laugh.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that was fun.
his hair has ceased to be white, but his mustache has remained. So yeah.
You think it would reverse everything like genetically? Like if I did it, my hair would grow back, but apparently not. I would still be bald as a child.
Yeah. Yeah. It's and you were gonna say about Maurice Evans?
Oh, sorry, I got distracted. No, it's just clear that he was in a very different film. Like he was trying for a certain level of acting that I think a lot of people around him weren't trying for, or the material wasn't necessarily living up to. But I give the guy credit for coming in and actually giving quite introspective performance at times, it felt like.
Well, it's like if you watch the two-parter, he's giving long monologues about aging. It's like he saw this as like his King Lear or something. Like he took it very seriously. And then there's like all those icky elements of the fact he'd like adopted this like 8-year-old girl.
Okay, I mean, I wrote down a quote on this.
Yeah.
I mean, it's Vera Miles' character, right, who says this?
Yes.
So to preface, Vera Miles' character is now married to a much older gentleman in universe, played by Maurice Evans, Sir Norman Strickett. And she says to him at one point, "When I was 10 years old, I was in love with you."
Mm.
And it does go on from there, and I would read more, but I probably get the podcast censored. But like that gave me some major ick.
Yeah.
As the kids like to say.
When she was 16, she put his head in his lap. That's what she starts talking about.
That's true.
It's good stuff.
Yeah.
It's good stuff.
Saucy. Tell me more.
Yeah. And like that's supposed to be like the big tragedy is like the aging of Swickert in the two-parter. And in some ways, maybe they were smart to cut it down to nothing for the movie.
Delete.
Yeah, because it is very well. It's the '60s, so anything goes. Yeah.
I'm not sure that went then either, Cam.
Well, apparently it did if it was being aired on The Man from U.N.C.L.E.
Oh, that's true. That is true. Cam, do you have you'd like to share?
I have two performances that I actually think are pretty fun in this. Number one is Bernard Fox's Jordine. I actually really like Jordine and the way he's this opportunist character who he works for Thrush, but he's also kind of an independent contractor. So he's hired to do the job, but he also kind of knows the lay of the land. And I like how he has a sense of humor when they find a bug in the in the room that he's using, and Ilya whistles into it. Like Jordine just laughs. He's like, "Nah, I'm okay anyways. Don't care." Like he just feels like he's trolling them a lot of the time, and he has that kind of classic fly in the ointment element that I think is actually really welcome. And I think if you had a tighter story involving what Vera Miles is doing, and then you threw Jordine into it, you might really have something. But unfortunately, Jordine is the character who becomes, frankly, the only interesting, I think, villain in the movie. The other performance, and it's not someone we've really shouted out in the past, Leo G. Carroll as Waverly, I thought was a lot of fun in this. When he shows up at the party and he has the umbrella with the lighter on the end, I like that he's kind of showing off some swagger, like he's not scared of these, hired goons. And when he's in the vat, how he's planning their escape. I like that Waverly isn't just kind of the, old man in the office. He shows that he has a certain amount of secret agent skills himself.
I'll join you on the Leo G. Carroll love. I think he's great. And he has a little bit of a sort of quirkiness to him that I always appreciate from Uncle, but also like he's weathered and seen it all, so nothing flaps him particularly. Like he just casually pulls out some dynamite from his tie.
Yeah, they really build the opening credits around him too, because they kind of thrown those credits together of the guy in the fire hydrant using a periscope, which is all new, and then footage from the TV show credits mixed together with Waverly watching like a camera of Solo walking through the building. And so it's interesting how they really put Waverly front and center in the opening credits, and then he plays a pretty prominent role in the back half.
So now I just want to say on those opening credits, since you brought them up, I think the greatest Robert Vaughn moment in any of the Man from U.N.C.L.E. movies, as you've got Ilya Kuryakin's character just moving forward, and that he's the one all the girls are swarming to. Literally, MGM would fake fan letters to Robert Vaughn to make him feel better because David McCallum was getting all of the attention on there. And this is, but what he does, what they managed to pull off in the opening credits is you start it off and you say, Robert Vaughn as Napoleon Solo, and you've got him freeze framed on there. And then they do David McCallum, and it's a freeze frame of Robert Vaughn again.
Mm-hmm.
When they do that, Leo G. Carroll gets his freeze frame. He's correctly identified.
Yeah.
But Robert Vaughn takes David McCallum's freeze frame in those opening credits.
Yeah, that's very true. That's very true. Although you were saying about all the girls liked David McCallum at this point, I think this story would argue that they also really liked Maurice Evans, or Morris Evans, I should say.
Yeah, well, they maybe did, but they hadn't gotten to the point where he becomes Dr. Zaius in Planet of the Apes yet. So, that's when he's really going to get that love.
That's true.
Well, there have to be a certain age to like Maurice Evans, apparently.
Well, Maurice Evans, like when I was watching the two-parter and he looked really old, I was sitting there going, how old was this man when he played Dr. Zaius? Because that's like a couple years later, like a year later, I think, 2 years later. And so I was like kind of admiring, like, wow, he was really old. But then obviously the de-aging proved otherwise. I also want to note with Jimmy Doohan, when we see him in the makeup to look like an old man as well, he looks like Orson Welles in Citizen Kane.
I will be putting a picture of those two side by side, so you can all appreciate that. I'll leave the like section on this final note. We talk about Maurice Evans being a sexy icon, and now we talk about Cease Linder being a sexy icon. Who's sexier? I mean, that is really the question we have left to tackle on the show. Let us know. I'm a Cease Linder kind of guy.
Whoever wins, we all lose.
Well, I'm going to go with the least sexy woman in this. Since we're talking about how sexy some of the men can be, and I just want to give a special shout out to Ann Elder, who does, and this I don't think this is her fault, the worst Irish accent ever committed to a feature film performance on there. Cleveland, Ohio is where she's from. Just could not pull it off.
As someone who lives in the United Kingdom but isn't Irish, I was offended on behalf of Ireland. It is truly some of the worst I've ever heard. And I've heard Cam trying to do accents, and that's atrocious. It goes from like Irish to Jamaican in different vowels within a word.
Well, this is because they don't have a dialogue coach.
Right.
Who's going to work with her on this. And of course, she's an actress. She's going to do everything. Now, do you know anything about Ann Elder?
No.
Who plays Joanna Sweet with her bad Irish accent.
Seen her in a couple things, but no.
She moves on to become really a writer on variety shows, which means she's in a room with a whole bunch of other people trying to come up with the kind of little jokey one-liners, the banter that people have on whether it's the Carol Burnett show or some other sort of variety specials. And my favorite credit for her, which I have to say, 1979, she gets a writing credit on Playboy's Roller Disco and Pajama Party. Which was
featuring Cease Linder.
which is no, but she's all I can say is I did not see it when that aired. I wouldn't have had any objection to having seen it, but that was a network broadcast thing. That was like one of the major networks said we need to broadcast Playboy's Roller Disco and Pajama Party TV special.
Roller Disco and Pajama Party, you said that was called?
Yeah. Yeah.
Are you double billing this afterwards with the Hawaiian film as well?
Yeah, that's right.
I don't think there was a lot of incest going on in that. I think just pure, heterosexual madness happening. So,
I mean, Cam's got a few hours left of his day today. He'll fit this all in. Don't worry. There's always time for incest.
Wow. Wow. Yeah.
We interrupt this program to bring you a special report.
Red alert, spyhards. We are shaking things up over on the Patreon page.
That's right, we are launching an exclusive new show where we tackle the exploits of the small screen's greatest secret agents, like Jack Bauer, George Smiley, and beyond.
And don't forget, every month you also get 2 Agents in the Field episodes where we decode the adventures of your favorite spy actors in their biggest non-spy movies. But Cam, tell the people what we have coming up next.
Holiday season is upon us over on the Patreon, and for our first Christmas movie, we are going to tackle 2005's Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, directed by Shane Black and starring Robert Downey Jr. and Val Kilmer. Does this satirical action film still pack a punch? Crack open a Generos beer? Join us and find out.
So strap on your Condor Man wings and soar into the future with us over at patreon.com/spyhards.
But before Big O zaps us with a red pulsating laser, let's get back to the Spy Jinx.
All right, as I'm piecing together my credibility or what's left of it, let's move on over to the dislike section. I think we have a lot more to say on this area that we haven't said already. John, you're up. Apart from the thing I just said, what do you dislike about One of Our Spies is Missing?
Well, I've already said it's the utter incompetence of the direction. There's a lack of action for no good reason. There's a lack of continuity. And I think the prime example in that is there's a character named Olga. And Olga, the actress, looks a little like Vera Miles. And so it's hard to tell, is this, one with a little bit more blush on or something like that between the two of them. And Olga gets killed in the second scene at Maison de Sala, which is in Paris. And for no reason, they pop over to Paris to go back there or whatever. But she gets killed in there. And the shot that she is killed in, you cannot tell you can't tell what's going on. She shoots somebody coming through the door. And only later in the dialogue does Jardine mention that he killed her. He said that was really sort of self-defense. But it's everything, the way you couldn't tell the two actresses apart, and whether it was one in a different costume or anything like that. I'm going to go with one other sort of level of incompetence thing there. And that is just that literally the entire problem of this, we don't know what evil might have been wrought had Madame de Sala actually pulled off her plan. What greater rights for women? That seems to be her motivation. She doesn't seem to want to destroy men, anything like this. She's like, I'm going to try to have political power by working through my powerful husband. She wouldn't be the first woman who would have done that, back in the 20th century. And a lot of good, I think, came from a lot of women who tried to do that on there. And at the end, everything Uncle does only makes the situation worse. If they don't get involved at all, Thrush doesn't get involved. A lot of people stay alive. They are not the ones who booby trap the de-aging machine. They are not the ones who convince the scientist that he needs to kill himself because otherwise he'll be forced to give up the formula. They're not the one who writes the formula in code. They're not the one who ends up shooting Madame de Sala. I mean, there's nothing that they accomplish whatsoever during the course of this mission that is good for anyone.
Which was actually the case in the previous movie as well, where you set up the Rip-Torn villain and he's ultimately just taken out by a random henchman. And you go like, oh, okay, so Uncle had no real say on the outcome of the story. That's seems like it's important.
Apparently, Uncle didn't even in that film warn the person who was going to be assassinated that they needed to wear some sort of protective vest so they would not be stabbed to death.
Yeah.
I mean, there's just, so yeah, that's that sort of storytelling and directorial incompetence is incredibly frustrating when you're watching a film and you can't overcome some of that with just a sense of fun or anything like that.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing that's chronically missing from this entire story anyway, is a sense of fun or enjoyment. It's oddly heavy at times, and then you also just not spending time with your uncles. I use that term loosely, but your uncle agents, and that's really my big dislike. Is this last film you've got Ilya and Napoleon together doing a mission. They spend almost the entire film together. This you've got Ilya chasing cats around Soho. Now we've all spent a lot of time walking around the streets of Soho at night. We know how that goes, which is absolutely fine. But it's not an interesting uncle story.
No, like it actually feels almost like a swipe at David McCallum to be like, oh yeah, in this story you're just going to be like following cats around for the first half an hour of this, two-parter.
And bless him, he's acting along those cats. Like he's doing his best, but like it just isn't fun.
No.
Yeah, and he's so incompetent in that opening scene where he crawls up onto a whole bunch of boxes. A dog starts barking. He starts waving his arm, losing his own balance. Nobody makes him lose his balance. He climbed up on something too rickety. He gets shot in the shoulder. I guess that's a separate scene with the dog. But in the first scene, he gets shot in the shoulder, which, it's nice to know somebody can get shot in an Uncle film who's a main character. But, we don't see any results. We just hear, oh, he's out of the hospital. Just a flesh wound, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and he's approaching that guy who's collecting the cats and trying to get information, and then the guy just gets shot. Anyway, it's like Ilya couldn't even see that was coming either. There's a lot of that. There's a lot of people getting shot while Uncle agents just kind of stand by, because you have the same thing with the Jimmy Doohan de-aged character at the chess club, where Robert Vaughn is like looking in a mirror at the time.
I mean, just to go to the freaking incompetence here, you've got this horrible scene in there where they're both in the cat collector's apartment, right? And you're not supposed to know it's Napoleon Solo, although he's wearing Napoleon Solo shoes, of course. So they've got their flashlights and they shoot each other's flashlights out of their hands.
Yeah.
And then they stand up, and when they go to the wide shot of them standing up, they are in arm's length of each other. I mean, it's there's no sense to it of like how you build a scene and construct a suspense scene like that on there. I mean, it's just it's really you could show this in film schools and just spend an entire semester going over this is how you do not direct.
I think I completely agree with what you just said. I think the thing I'll add to it is one thing I've always maintained is you have to make me interested in the story or invested in the characters. And I'm obviously pre-invested in the Uncle agents. But then this film makes the cardinal sin of separating them and also de-emphasizing the reason you're here, which is to spend time with the Uncle agents. And so I don't care about the plot, and I'm not able to just hang out with the people I want to hang out with. So I'm left with 90 minutes of just sort of, well, here we go. And John, you are my superhero for sitting through this twice and reading the script too. I mean, all credit to you. You're a man who does his research.
I try.
Well, and like when you watch the two-parter, like it's Swickert and the Vera Miles de Sala character who are very much up front in the story. But that's kind of the problem too, is that they're not interesting enough to really support the story. So it's not like they jumped from a home run two-parter to a cut down, mangled film. It's like they never really found their way with this just story in general.
Well, it's telling that this is the only time they adapted a book.
Yeah, no, that's very true. Yeah.
Probably some lessons learnt there. That just leaves me for you, Cam. Any dislikes you'd like to share?
So I mean, like the Vera Miles character is just completely like botched. I think there's so much I could have done with this character, and even like maybe like an age thing too, because you have the young model being killed, which is uncharacteristically violent for something you see on Man from U.N.C.L.E. Like typically that's the kind of character that would be probably saved and be like the innocent character. But you just have no psychological insight into Vera Miles other than her talking about wanting power and women not being recognized, but they don't do anything with that. She's selling out to Thrush in no time, and you just want to know where that character is going, because I think it's in theory, really interesting villain, and that is ultimately kind of leads into my biggest dislike, which is the complete lack of payoff to anything you've spent your time investing in. Like the villain plot, okay, we are sitting here wandering through this 90 minutes, we're watching cats being rounded up, this is going to lead to something, and it leads to really nothing, and it's a lot of very underwhelming send-offs. Vera Miles' death is meaningless. You just kind of shrug and go, okay. Jardine's exploding, machine death. You go, oh, okay, well, that's random. And you have Ilya then in exposition saying, oh, well, the machine was booby-trapped, and the scientist wrote that it was all booby-trapped in his notes. Okay, I guess. Like, it feels like they've set up some characters who in theory could have been interesting, kind of taken their motivations and made them kind of confusing or uninteresting, and then given them very poor send-offs. So ultimately, like, what's your takeaway? It feels so underwhelming when you get to the final scene of this, and they're just sitting in the office talking about the rejuvenating formula. It's like, yeah, I feel like I didn't get anything out of this adventure, and so this kind of like breather at the end is really not necessary because we never really felt breathless at all.
I mean, I feel a bit sort of breathless, but that's because I've aged so much watching this that I've developed a heart condition. I'm really struggling. But yeah,
you are like Swickert. You are the Swickert of
yeah,
Swinerds.
I am. I'm actually Jimmy Doohan in face makeup, though. I'm not actually that age.
Jimmy Doohan looked pretty dashing though with the mustache.
Was there more of Jimmy Doohan in the TV episode?
No.
Okay, it really is a sort of a blink and you'll miss him appearance.
Yeah, they may have had a little bit of a longer dialogue exchange, but in terms of scenes, no.
They couldn't keep him in longer because they were going to violate some rule about having people in England actually having British accents.
Right. I mean that is true. To be fair, his is almost too realistic. Yes, someone was going to come after him. They were like, oh, we need to hire someone to balance it out, and then they call up Anne Elder. And you end up with a nice balance of awful accents. Well, let's go over to final notes before we wrap up with the knock list. I'll start us off. I've got two. One's a question, but one's a note. I really enjoyed when the Yankee Doodle Dandy showed up and the Star Spangled Banner started playing and threw Napoleon Solo around. I have no idea where that character came from or went to, but it made me laugh for a quick second.
Well, that's very generous of you there. I mean, the Texican who was out there, who shows up completely randomly. I mean, we do not know. Nobody's saying like, I'm waiting on a date to arrive. Oh, I met this American. There's no seed planted that this guy's going to show up, and he's not in the TV episode, if I understand correctly, right?
That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah, he's But that's incredibly generous of you. But they wanted to get as many redheads into this episode as possible, so he's a redheaded actor. Right. So so they got that going.
And I was just going to ask, if this age reversal machine did exist, would you use it, and what age would you go back to?
Oh, I can answer this, I think.
Okay, go on, Cam.
I think like probably 35. I think if I could just lock in at 35, I'm good.
Why 35 specifically? Why is that sort of the ripe age for you?
I feel like that was like my my prime. It was all downhill.
That was your peak.
That was it. That was the peak. It's been all downhill since.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's about the time you met me. So yeah, it's all been pretty bad since then.
Now I'm like the crypt keeper.
Yeah, that explains why you turn your camera off usually when we podcast. John, any insight on that one?
Any insight on whether I would use the de-aging machine or not?
Yeah, would you? Would you jump
Oh
in?
my God! Of course, I would jump in. I would de-age myself to an age where I was younger than when I actually saw this movie.
Perfection. Perfection. Can't get any better than that. Anyone else have any final notes? John, anything you'd like to mention?
No, I can't believe we've managed to talk about this for as long as we have.
You've exercised the demon almost until the knock list comes up in a second. Cam, anything from you?
I've got a couple things.
Okay.
Using Swickert growing old as stakes for your story is a terrible idea.
What if he gets older, Cam? Oh no!
It's like, what if this creaky old man gets older? It's like, okay, like, why do I care about this person?
Pass.
So that one jumped out. There's another part. I think all my moments have to do with Swickert, actually. There's a scene where he's talking about chess to Solo, and he shows this board that's labeled Lancer, the character that Jimmy Doohan played, and he said it's so he could play chess by mail. How long would that game take?
Like, less time than it feels like it takes to watch this film.
Is that something people used to do? Was chess by mail?
Yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
my God!
They do it by telegram, not mail, because it's quicker. But yeah.
All right, so I sort of passed, but I want to ask if I can leap back in with Cam. Do you have other things you wanted to add to your final notes?
I have one more, but if
Go
you jump in,
no,
and
go
I'll follow.
go. I'll go after you.
Okay, well, there's a part where they're in the chess club, and Maurice Evans is talking to Jimmy Doohan's character, and he starts drooling out one side of his mouth. And it's all I could look at. It's in the two-parter, and it's prolonged, and it's torturous to watch. And so when we got to the movie and they'd cut it down, I thought, are they going to cut around it? No, they didn't. It's all I could stare at. It was so unbelievably distracting that I was genuinely fearful that Maurice Evans had some sort of problem that I was going to have to watch for the rest of the story.
I don't know what to add to that. I didn't even notice the drool, but I'm almost tempted to go back and watch it.
It's awful.
Oh, go ahead. You'd love it. You'd love it. All right. So here's what I wanted to add in. I wanted to read an actual review of this when it was released as a feature film from the UK.
Ooh.
Just the beginning of it there, and it's going to take a couple of sentences. So the headline is "Uncle Seen in a Spirit of Hard-Won Tolerance," and this is the first paragraph, and then there's a punchline at the end of the first paragraph, which I didn't expect. So the last week I underwent an hour and a half of corrective training. In the first half hour of my past film reviews flashed before my eyes. The next half hour had me silently invoking forgiveness for my past opinions. And for the last 30 minutes, which lasted a day and a half, I longed for the soothing balm of Norman Wisdom, Jerry Lewis, Haley Mills, and Stanley Baker. This is the opening paragraph of the review of One of Our Spies is Missing, but he's actually talking about the film Kid Rodello was the name of that hour and a half.
Oh.
I've never heard of this movie, so I don't know anything about it in there. And then he says, now I know what it is like to be bored. And I am ashamed that I gave the dreaded name of boredom to the wishy-washy feeling of vague unrest, which was all I had previously experienced. Now I have seen the horrors of true triteness, and I have used up all my superlatives on unworthier works. And then he goes on to say, which leaves me reviewing One of Our Spies is Missing, the latest Uncle film, in a new and chastened spirit of moderation. I will not describe it as a load of crab, which is what he puts there, but rather as a mildly entertaining and at times exciting, always lively adventure starring the well-beloved David McCallum as Ilya Kuryakin and everybody's favorite auntie, Robert Vaughn.
Okay.
A positive review that starts out expressing my feelings exactly for this film and then veers off in a way I did not expect.
That was like a real plot twist there. Yeah, I didn't see that coming.
That had more of an emotional ride to it than the film.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Well, I love the review, but let's give our own knock list time. I think if we haven't telegraphed it in the last 90 minutes, you'll never know. But John, would you care to enlighten us as to whether you think One of Our Spies is Missing is making the list of the greatest spy movies of all time?
Well, again, not the greatest, but the ones that need to be seen, which is very different than the greatest. And
You're right.
and when we did the Wrecking Crew, I don't know that I trashed it any less than I've trashed this movie, and I still managed to get it onto the knock list there. I am not going to try that this time. It is a hard no.
I thank you, because there is a universe where you may have convinced me otherwise from my own vote. But I'm glad you went with no. It's 1-0, all still to play for, though. Cam could surprise us with some love of terrible Irish accents. What do you have to say, Cameron?
Yeah, it's a big no for me. I'm really glad we put To Trap a Spy on the list, because so far that's looking like the right choice. Boy, was that the right choice so far.
It felt like a film, didn't it? Like an actual film.
Yeah, and I would also just say, going from the source material they're drawing from, this is also the least of the stories we've seen turned into a movie as well. So, I'll be very curious when we bounce on to movie number 5, if they maybe have a stronger two-parter to pull from.
Well, we'll be finding out in the future. That's 2 no's. So my vote is absolutely pointless, but you get to hear it anyway. It's obviously a no from me too. This is it's actually interesting. We've actually watched a couple of really bad films recently, and this is another one for the pile. I had a really rough time with this film, and so it's a no. But I do have to ask one extra question.
Yeah.
When we have emphatic no's like this, we have to bring up the disavowed list, which is our list of the worst spy movies that people should avoid like the plague, much like Trenchcoat.
Right.
Is One of Our Spies is Missing bad enough to make the disavowed list? I think this might be the first time we've had a guest on for a disavowed list question. So I'm keen to hear your insight on this one, John.
Well, I'm going to start right on in here, and I'm going to say, when your feature film that you spent extra money on to shoot additional scenes to from your TV episodes that were your source material, and it makes it worse, I'm like, hell yeah, disavow this puppy. Don't make our mistake.
Yeah, I mean, they do, I think, mangle the strengths of the original story, and that's not something you want to do in theory. Yeah, and a lot of what's added feels unnecessary. Like, it's just kind of distractions, like, doing unnecessary scenes with Lorelai, for example. It's tough because I don't dislike this as much as, say, Trenchcoat or some of the worst movies we've watched on this show. But I also have to acknowledge that there should be a basement for Man from U.N.C.L.E. films. And this is significantly, I think, worse in terms of storytelling than the previous 3. And so maybe it is like the cautionary tale of the U.N.C.L.E. films of what could happen when you just, as a cash grab, tried to turn something that wasn't meant to be a movie into a movie. Because there's nothing about this that's particularly cinematic. There's nothing about the plot of it. There's nothing about most of the characters. It doesn't build to any sort of finale that is the kind of thing you'd put in theaters. So maybe it does deserve to make the disavow, just as a do not do this kind of warning.
I mean, there are films on the disavowed list that I would sooner rewatch than this.
Yeah, I'd probably watch Taken 3 over this, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, this is
Maybe.
When you look at this film and you say, like, okay, let's look at let's say you lived in a place where Man from U.N.C.L.E. wasn't on TV, or you didn't pay your parents wouldn't pay the TV license in the UK, so your world of Man from U.N.C.L.E. is from going and watching this movie, right? These movies, and this is the movie that it's a soul killing movie. It doesn't have production. It doesn't have production value. It's not very funny. There's no laugh out loud moment like I knew it wouldn't last, which is, I think, in the last movie that y'all looked at there with the wedding scene where there's the dead body in the car and the bride screams. Which was, I laughed out loud when that moment happened. There's some production value things. There's nothing sexy in this. There's nobody who's, they have some nice sexy moments in some of these films. None of them are good. Okay. I mean, just none of them are good, but there are some moments where you went like, dang, they had a stuntman jump from a moving car to the open door of a plane, traveling down a runway at high speed. I mean, that's a moment
in the past film, yeah.
Yeah, I'm watching it and I'm going like, hang on, buddy. I mean, you guys will get to the gyrocopters swooping down in this massive gyrocopter attack that comes up in one of the films. I mean, there's some nice stuff. John Wayne's yacht appears in one of the movies, The Wild Goose. I mean, there's some fun things that just show up here, and you've got some really interesting actors who show up in there. Kim Darby, you've got Carol Lindley, you've got some nice talents that pop in there. This does not have any of that. I mean, I'm not saying Maurice Evans or Vera Miles are, weak actors at all. I'm just saying that, they don't bring some level of star power to the experience where you go like, oh my God, that's Telly Savalas chewing up the scenery here.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's very true. And actually, another thing I'll note, just kind of behind the scenes, I always like to have a funny line or something like that from a movie that we are covering to open the podcast with. And when I watched the two-parter, I had like notes of like, oh, I could use this one or this one. They stripped them all out for the movie. Not a single one remained when I watched the film.
I think the legacy of this film has been written by this podcast, and I think that legacy is the disavowed list.
Okay.
Cam,
fair enough.
Grab the slide whistle. Now that's podcasting.
That's right. That's right. A nod to Man with the Golden Gun, of course, the worst musical decision in the history of spy cinema.
And we all got, when I was in Thailand recently looking at Man with the Golden Gun locations, the tour leader, Martin Mulder, gave out to everyone slide whistles.
Yes.
Were they golden colored as well?
No, and they have Man with the Golden Gun written on the side of.
Oh wow!
I kind of want one. I kind of want one of those. That feels like the best bit of Bond memorabilia you can have. Really,
I should have brought it over here. It's in the other room. But,
Oh, like dual slide whistles, you and Cam simultaneously. That would have been a beautiful moment. Listen, it's been quite the journey. 90 minutes of our time is now missing after talking about One of Our Spies is missing. But I have had a wonderful time, and John, it's been a pleasure having you back on the show. Your penance feels like it's being paid slowly. I can't promise your next visit will be any better, but I'd like to keep things interesting for you.
Well, we'll do what we can do.
We'll do what we can do. It's been a pleasure. Now, you tease what you've been working on with Bond things, which we probably can't announce anything else in the future, but can people find more from you online? Last time we spoke, you were a bit of a hard man to find online, but do you have any presence?
Yeah, I'm not really online. So, if somebody is desperate to get in touch with me, I would just stick them to you. You guys have my email address. And if there's something legit, forward it on. But The Secret World of James Bond will be coming forward. You can read a little bit more about it at ianflemingfoundation.org, which is the IFF's website. And We'll hopefully in 2025, I've got a project that's going to take me through the end of January right now before I can really leap back in and start putting some of that stuff out. But it'll be YouTube and it will be podcast.
Awesome.
Well, let us know when that comes out. We'll do what we can to help spread the word. But and we'll put links in the show notes as well to the Ian Fleming Foundation. People can find out more on there. John, once again, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for joining us to send some love and some hate towards the Man from U.N.C.L.E.
Take care, guys, okay?
There you go. That was the fourth Man from U.N.C.L.E. film. One of Our Spies is missing. Wasn't a great film. It got disavowed, but we had a great time talking about it. And I want to again thank John Cork for taking the time to sit down with us and bring his wealth of knowledge to our Man from U.N.C.L.E. coverage.
Yes, this was an absolute blast. And it made me excited to watch the Man from U.N.C.L.E. fifth film, which is not something that One of Our Spies is missing did.
No, the next one is The Spy in the Green Hat, which came out in 1967, so it's the following year.
Yeah, and we'll have to find green hats to wear when we record that episode.
Which is pointless because we don't do video.
I know, right? That's the joke.
Oh, well, I'm wearing a green hat right now. They'll never know, Cam.
So am I.
But we're not going to U.N.C.L.E. just yet. We'll take a little bit of a break for a month or two, and we'll come back to our favorite men from U.N.C.L.E. But in the meantime, Cam, what are we talking about next week?
This is a big one, and one people have wanted us to do since probably week 1 or 2 of this podcast. We are going to look at 2011's Tinker, Tailor, Soldier, Spy, the beloved adaptation of the Le Carre story.
Yes, it is also our Christmas film.
Yeah.
And it's one of the few spy movies that has a connection to Christmas. And this is, as Cam said, a film that's been requested since day naught. And there is, of course, 2 famous adaptations of this, and we're going with the more recent one with Gary Oldman. We will eventually tackle the TV version over on our Patreon, patreon.com/spyhard. You can find out more about that there, and links in the show notes below. And we'll do both of the TV adaptations of that over there. But your mission, folks, should you choose to accept it, is to bring some Yuletide joy to Spy Hards with us next week as we take a look at one of the most important spy movies of the current century. It is 2011's Tinker, Tailor, Soldier, Spy. It's about time. I'm glad we're finally doing it.
That's right. And Gary Oldman got an Oscar nomination for this film, and so I can't wait to talk about him a little bit more because we've been covering him from Slow Horses over on the Patreon.
Exactly. And again, cheap plug, if you want to find out more about our Patreon, help keep the lights on at Spy Hards HQ. Cam is currently watching me in the room with lights that are actually flickering. It makes it look like I'm living in some sort of a hovel.
It looks like that Soho backlot.
Of course. No cats here, though. No cats. But find out more about that in the show notes below. And if you want to follow us discreetly, you can always find us on social media at SpyHards. That's SpyHards on Facebook, X, Instagram, TikTok, Threads. I don't know. We're everywhere. But until next time, folks, you'll find Cam and I furiously debating who is the sexiest Felix Leiter.